Hello, Taiwan Green. Are y'all having any issues at the moment, or no?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're just typing in our order.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Yep.
Say correction.
Wait, I apologize. I wrote the order wrong. I gotta remodel. Alright, I've changed the order again. Sorry for all the delay.
Alrighty, cool. If both teams are ready, then you can go ahead and start whenever you want.
Okay, hi, can I be seen and heard?
Yes, you can.
Yep.
Okay, for gender pronouns, she, her, and PI is in chat. With that being said, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. At this point, the courts are so backlogged with cases that if you are arrested for some random petty crime like shoplifting, you are likely going to spend a year in prison before your case gets heard. This looks like an entire year off of your life where you have to spend this entire year living in a small cell with hardened and seasoned criminals, and you will be coerced into doing things like joining these prison gangs and spending an extensive amount of time in prison, especially when you are not able to pay your bail. Few arguments then on side proposition. Firstly, let's talk about how the system destroys people. Few levels under this. Firstly, on how it's discriminatory. I have a few key scenarios I'd like to discuss and how these key scenarios tend to harm minorities the most. Firstly, on drug-related crime then. I think on average, minorities tend to get arrested the most in connection to drug-related crimes. I don't think that just means that they are always guilty of these crimes. I think it's a lot of the times I tend to get arrested because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. That is to say, kids who grow up in neighborhoods with neighborhood drug gangs are much likely going to be arrested in connection to a drug-related crime. I think that a lot of times this unfairly targets minorities because on average, people of color tend to live in poorer areas. I think the problem is that a lot of the times in these cases, the bail amount is usually set to the street value of the drug. For example, if you're arrested on conspiracy to transport X amount of cocaine, that probably means that the bail is usually set well above $1 million and well above the $1 million and at least in the millions. I think a lot of the times the families of these people who are arrested cannot pay this huge amount of bail. I also think that a lot of the times charges are not necessarily ground on solid proof, and a lot of the times you can be arrested for things like shoplifting because of racial profiling within the police force. Second scenario then on minor petty crimes, right? I think a lot of these minor petty crimes look like shoplifting because a lot of times minorities will shoplift out of necessity because otherwise if they don't steal, they'll probably starve. I think also instances of breaking and entering where nobody was actually hurt. I think that a lot of the times in these cases, bail is usually set relatively low to a relatively low degree. This looks like, I don't know, maybe $1,000 or $2,000. But I also think that this is still problematic, even if it is set to a relatively low amount, because a lot of families of minorities still do not have the money to be able to afford an emergency payout, right? Emergency payout. A lot of families in the United States already cannot. Already, a lot of families in the United States don't even have $400 ready to go at any given moment. What are the impacts of this then? I think that the impacts of this, and I'll stress why they're particularly important when it comes to desperate families, right? I think that desperate families may turn to entities like bail brokers or maybe gangs or loan sharks to get money in order to put together bail in order to get their family member or to get their friend out of their holding cell, right? I think this is bad because this gives leverage to these entities that are often abusive, right? I think that this looks like a lot of the times these bail brokers or these loan sharks will capitalize on the fear and vulnerability of these families because they fully understand that these families are worried about the fact that their loved one is going to prison or is going to stay in a holding cell for like another year before they can see them again. I think they can do things like I think that they can do things like demand a last minute payment because they know that these families are very reliant on them in order to get their family members bail paid. But this can also look like charging incredibly high interest rates on these loans and on these loans that they give out, right? I also think that this is unfair to the families of minorities and to minorities in general when you jail people for being poor, and that'll be the second layer of this argument, right? I think that at the point where you cannot put together bail is the point where you are forced to stay detained in holding cells, right? I think that given the context of COVID, a lot of these courts are incredibly backlogged with cases. If you are arrested today, your case will probably be heard in a year, and also a lot of times delays can happen. So even if in a year you're ready for your case to be heard, there may be another delay in which you have to sit in prison for another 2 months. I think that there's I think that the impact of this impacts of this argument can be proven on two levels. Firstly, on a psychological level, right? I think that once at the point you enter prison, you're already feeling incredibly vulnerable because you are scared, right? You're scared of this incredibly foreign environment, and also of an environment that is known to be like scary because of the fact that there are criminals in prison and criminals who are also awaiting trial alongside you. I also think that you are more likely to enter prison gangs because a lot of the times prison gangs and gang culture in general tend to capitalize on the vulnerability of these people in order to tell them that you need to join us, otherwise you're not going to be protected. You're not going to be protected by rival gangs, right? I think secondly, on a financial level, a lot of the times these minorities cannot work and provide whilst they are waiting for trial, especially if they are waiting for trial within a holding cell because they could not pay bail. I think a lot of the times this means that the families of these minorities, must resort to must live with very limited money during this time because they are trying to save up for their relatives' bail. What about the second? Because they're trying to save up for this relative's bail. I think that also this means that a lot of these minorities don't have the money to hire good lawyers anymore if they are always don't have the ability to hire good lawyers anymore, and this ultimately fails them at the end of the day because the public defender system is just incredibly incompetent in paying the public defenders, but also in defending these people who actually need help. Second argument then on what a world without cash bail would likely look like, and why this world is largely better. I think the counterfactual on our side is that we're probably going to be much more efficient in court. I think that this looks like cases getting to court quicker. People only having to wait in their holding cells for days, right? For days or hours. I think this is likely going to be true for a few reasons. Then. Firstly, I think there's no reason in the status quo, I think there's no reason for politicians to change the cash bail system because it works for them, right? A lot of these politicians tend to be very privileged people, so they don't really have an incentive to care about the sufferings of these minorities, especially given the fact that a lot of the times low-income countries have had a historically low voter engagement. I don't think that politicians in the status quo necessarily have the incentive to cater for people when they don't vote. I said POIs in chat, but before I move to protected, I'll take POI.
I need to type it or say it.
Okay, well, it's protected time now, so I'll move on to my second layer of analysis then. I think that on our side of the house, you don't have an excuse to justify holding people in jail forever anymore, right? Or not forever, or for months or years at a time anymore, right? I think that is only on our side of the house where we tell you that without this sort of justification that the cash bail system works and that we are keeping alleged criminals in prison before their trial date. I think it's only on our side of the house where we are able to solve the inherent problems with the cash bail system. I think this is largely because there's a larger sense of efficacy that we need to get these cases resolved. We cannot just let these people sit in jail forever, especially when they do not have a say in it. on our side, we are better able to solve the current issues with a cash bail system, right? I think this is largely because on our side, rich people cannot just buy their way out of a holding cell with daddy's money and use it to get a good lawyer, and so that they don't end up getting convicted at the end because they were able to get a good lawyer and were able to get a head start. I secondly think that there is no need for there's no need for the existence of these bail brokers and of these loan sharks in the first place. Is only on our side of the house where we can prove to you how we better the situations of minorities, especially when it comes to the judicial system. For those reasons, we're so proud to propose.
Sorry, I had to set up my timer. All right. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Quote, if you only hear one side of the story, you have no understanding of it at all. So this is exactly what is happening to on the proposition side. Judges, the propositions are only framing one side of the story. They're only looking into a very, very narrow aspect of maybe one particular stakeholder. What we care about is the whole society. What is better for the greater society as a whole? We believe that we need to, in order to achieve the best version of the world, we need to offer the better alternative for the whole majority world. So, in my case, I'll be first addressing a couple of rebuttals against their case, and then since the opposition has never defined anything, we'll just having the opposition side define all the key definitions within this case. And so then I'll be talking about my two arguments, which is deterrence and incapacitation. And then my second speaker will then be talking about the greater good for society and also the moral concepts, while I'll be focusing on what exactly is beneficial. So a couple of rebuttals against them first. And actually, before moving on, I'll be talking about a couple of definitions. So what exactly is cash bail? The proposition I've never brought up what exactly cash bail is. So I'll be saying that cash bail is the cash money that is required for people when they're caught of a crime, and then if they aren't able to turn it in, they'll have to be kept in detention for it in jail. And so this cash bail money is to make sure that these people actually show up for trial. And by the way, I prefer my POS to be verbally. Also, I'll be talking about moving on to a couple of rebuttals. There are a case about discrimination and how it's harming the minorities. Well, I like to bring up evidence by Pew Research Center by showing how 95% of these poor people who are gotten to jail are actually guilty. Only those 5% are actually innocent. Think about it. Are you going to change the whole system and maybe get 95% of them get away with their crimes in order to just fulfill the needs of these 5%? I'll be explaining that later on my arguments. And next of all, they have talked about consequentialism, where they continue to talk about the bad harm for these minorities. And then I'll say there's more efficient within the court. We say that no, it's not more efficient to court. These people are not going to show up in the court case because they don't have bail money. They don't have the cash bail money in order to ensure their presence anymore. And they talk about how the rich gets away with it. Well, first of all, there's still a trial where they have to go through. And second of all, the other side have never said that this harm is not exclusive towards our side. They also never countered it. Next of all, I'll be moving on to my argument. And before that, is there any POIs? All right. So now I'll be moving on to my argument about deterrence. So it preventing future crimes. So since we have a scarier system and a more regulated and limited and regulated system, it will warn these criminals to actually watch out for their actions, and it also discourages them from committing crimes. While on their side, with no cash bail at all, offering no alternative solution, we're saying that these criminals would just run away, because since originally in our system, these poor people, they need the cash bail money. and they'll be able to get this cash bail money after the trial if they have shown their presence. But under their case, these since there's no cash bail, these poor criminals could then just run away from their crimes because they don't need this, because there isn't a cash bail system where they could get their money back. And so this would then takes away the concept and meaning of deterrence, preventing future crimes. They're going to encourage, there isn't a as regulated system, and so there's a lot of crimes committed, and a lot of them would run away from responsibilities that they actually need to do. And so next of all is incapacitation. So what exactly is incapacitation? It's preventing people from doing crimes. And so, for example, if we have these 95%, as I already listed, within jail, and they aren't able to run away from the trial because they actually need the cash bail money. So then what exactly could be happening is that these, in further of incapacitation, they prevents the people from doing crime because they're actually in jail, they're unable to commit any crimes. And then in my second speaker will then bring up in rehabilitation, showing how these people could understand how to become a better version of themselves within jail. And so, first of all, I'll talk about extend more exactly what is that exactly in the status quo. So the status quo, currently, we have this cash bail system which ensures people from running away from their crimes. And so there's also this system where, to counter the fact about loan sharks, there's also bail bond man companies. So bail bond man companies, what exactly they do is that they offer to pay the cash bail first, and then after they're kind of a corporation within with the court, and they're able to when they make sure that the criminal is showed up within the court, then they'll the criminal will then pay them back the money when they're able to. So this is show that there's a lot of other solutions, not only loan sharks and the example that I've given. And so we show that the not only is the proposition only bringing up the worst case scenario, and also only a very narrow amount of the percent of a greater society, we say that we need to broaden our stakeholders. Not only does our stakeholders include these criminals, only the innocent criminal they're bringing up, there's also illegal criminals who actually committed crimes, which is over majority of 95%. And furthermore, these criminals are also there's also like society and also government, what exactly, and also like the justice system. With a regulated justice system, not only does it make it have a better modification, but also gives the criminals a further warning of not committing any crimes within the future. And also the fact of what exactly is better for these criminals. Is it for them to run away from their being able to run away from their issues and also the crimes that they have committed, or is it better for them in order to go to jail, actually serve for a purpose, and understanding that what they did is wrong? Yes, thank you. Yes.
When you are thrown into the lion's den with dangerous criminals and the presence of prison gangs, how does this give you an environment to self-reflect during your time in prison?
Well, we believe that the proposition side is bringing up the worst face of everything. The jail is not what you always think it is. It's not just gangs and people trying or having gang fights and such. What exactly jail is for, and why there is jail, is because they believe that this will be a good place for people to become a better version of themselves. As you can see, that people after jail, they're able to become a better version of themselves, understanding the crimes that they did in the past is wrong. And so we believe that this brings up to rehabilitation, which my second speaker will be further moving on to. Next, I would like to having a couple of attack source or case again. So if the system was so bad, why was this system in place for such a long time? There must be a reason to this. It must be because it ensures these criminals in going back, making sure that they're present in court. And so this system is actually beneficial. If you could see, if you search up any article about why is cash bail bad, you will see no expert or no judicial branch officer who actually write that it is not beneficial to our society, because they do admit that it is beneficial to our society. Not only does it help society, the greater majority, and also the greater majority to become a better version of themselves, having a better regulated system. And so this is why we believe that we are opposition side. We bring up the fact that not everything is always about the minority, and we have to see that what exactly is greater for the greater society. And that's why we highly encourage you to vote for opposition side, as we are better for society as a whole. Thank you.
Hi, just to clarify, am I visible and audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, pronouns she, her, and verbal POI is. Please, okay. My time starts in 3, 2, 1. The point where opposition loses today's debate is when they basically say, I quote, that not everything is about the minorities, but it is when cash bail is directly harming these minorities and letting these rich individuals get away scotch-free because they are able to pay these millions of dollars in cash bail and can possibly run away, where poor individuals are stuck in A, toxic environments, and B, are not given their individual principal rights because they simply could not afford the money to pay these cash bails in the first place. So a few things in my speech then. Firstly, a few responses to our opponent's case, then a rebuilding starter case, and lastly, our extension about how it's principally wrong to give individual people's money and freedom based on their ability to pay the amount of cash bail. So first response, basically, their framing talks about how basically cash bail will ensure people to show up. The response is that they simply do not know how cash bail works, right? In the current status quo, if rich people are getting arrested and are told to pay this cash bail, they are able to because they have more resources, they have more family connections, and they are, again, rich. So this means that they can also go away and leave. And we tell you that this will not 100% always ensure people showing up because rich people don't really care if, oh, I spend a little bit of money to pay cash bail, but I want to avoid my jail sentence, so I will just, for example, not show up in the first place. So because of this, we told you how cash bail does not 100% does not actually ensure individuals from showing up in the first place. Secondly, we told you how it doesn't matter if individuals show up if poor individuals are not able to even go out in the first place, right? We told you from our first speaker how this is going to be simply unfair because poor individuals are poor, they are being kept in jail cells where rich people are able to get away scotch-free. We told you several harms that those will happen and be inflicted on these poor individuals, right? A, they are, for example, only forced to turn to jail brokers where they are super coercive and they will force these, for example, these poor individuals to take random plea deals are simply not beneficial to them at all. And B, we told you how basically by captivating them into that jail cell, I will further explain on later in my speech, how that is A, principally wrong, and B, it will also further harm them because they're stuck in this toxic environment with other individuals that are probably, for example, gang members, drug dealers, etc., which will also further influence them and harm them in the future. So because of this, we simply believe that cash bail, what opposition is trying to say about cash bail ensuring people to show up will simply not work because individuals who are able to go outside, well, no thank you, are able to handle the fact of not showing up because the people who are going outside, as I already said, are rich individuals, and rich individuals simply does not care whatsoever if they lose a few amounts of money. Second of all, then, our opponents talk about how their first argument is about how it's able to prevent future crimes because on our side, they can run away, right? But they simply misunderstand our counterfactual. As Sophia told you, our whole second argument talks about how our second counterfactual is A, able to still give more fairness to these poor individuals, but B, also 100% ensure these individuals to always show up in court, right? We told you how there's a huge probability and feasibility that our world is going to, for example, have faster court cases, speed up these court cases in which these individuals won't have to spend possibly months in these jail cells, right? We gave you several mechanisms as to why these politicians and these court systems have this incentive and have this pressure to speed up their court systems. Why is this? Because society has a standard that, oh, you have to provide justice. You have to, for example, provide justice to my society. And on our side of the world, if you have no cash bail, society has a narrative that, oh, if you not speed up the court processes, then you as a court system, I should not trust you because you yourself is not, for example, giving me any justice because these individuals are still able to run free. So because of this massive pressure coming from society and the single standard for these court systems, we told you how there's a massive mechanisms that these politicians and no thank you, these court systems are able to speed up these court processes, meaning that there's simply no way that these individuals can run away on our side of the world because they basically will have their court hearings in a few hours or at most a few days, right? So because of this, we actually believe that we can prevent future crimes in the first place. Our last rebuttal then tackles their second argument about how they can prevent future crimes. But how is it that they can prevent future crimes when the narrative of society is that basically, oh, if you're rich, you can commit crimes and you can still get away because you are able to afford this cash bail. Because of this, it is
is simply unfair, and B, it will simply not prevent any crimes, but will simply incentivize criminals to commit more crimes because they feel like if I have the resources, I can get away scot-free. And if I, for example, run away, I don't care if I lose a few thousands or millions of dollars because, again, I am rich. And these individuals who are going to get harmed the most are these poor individuals who probably committed these crimes based on necessities because they probably do not have enough money to even get their life going. For example, trying to get the necessities of food, water, shelter, etc. Right? So because of this, the ones that are getting harmed are these individuals who are poor, and they are not benefiting them whatsoever. Right? So because of this, we simply believe that our opponent's case will not work at all because A, they will incentivize individuals to run away even more, whereas the counterfactual on our side is that we ensure 100% that they can't run away, and B, their basically what opposition is trying to do is incentivize criminals who are rich to even commit more crimes because there's simply no accountability whatsoever then. So now moving on to my extension with integrated rebuilding. So what's my extension? Basically how it's principally wrong to condition people's money and freedom based on their ability to pay the amount of cash bill. So note that every individual within the country has the right, no thank you, of people, for example, they have the guarantee that they should have the right, unless they are already proven guilty, because the court systems are supposed to follow the saying of innocent until proven guilty. We tell you that the goal of the countries is to basically give their citizens rights for them to make individual choices that can benefit themselves. The government is trying to help and work people. The 8th Amendment in America literally states that its excessive bail should not be required nor excessive fines imposed. This literally states that, these individuals should not be forced to pay money in order for their freedom, since there's simply no evidence whatsoever to prove that they're all guilty in the first place, right? We tell you that basically the comparative on opposition side of the world is with cash bail, you're actively taking away the rights of these individuals because these poor individuals are not able to pay these monies, right? Then opposition keeps on saying their one main rebuttal is basically, this statistical evidence proves that individuals who are arrested are most likely the ones that are actually guilty in the first place. But note that this is simply not true, right? Because we actually believe that these individuals are innocent until proven guilty, and because in the first place, there's no evidence whatsoever during the bail time that they are guilty, is the fact that they should have the freedom in the first place. If these individuals have a lot of evidence mounting against them during the trial of determining the amount of cash bail, we tell you that if there's 100% certain that these criminals are guilty of, for example, the crimes, then we told you our counterfactual is basically saying that we will not let them be able to actually have this in the first place, right? So because of this, our opponent's argument does not simply stand whatsoever. So what is the comparative of this extension then? Why can't our counterfactual solve this? We tell you that because we're going to be able to speed up for example, these court processes, is the fact that we actually believe that these individuals are not forced to pay this amount of money because they themselves will directly go to court and directly have a justified hearing and a justified sentence. Because of this, we are able to prevent all the harms of being discriminated by these minorities, and also B, prevent the harms of taking away their rights because these individuals are not forced to pay money for their freedom, which is what is going to happen on opposite sides of the world, which is again only going to benefit these rich individuals but not these poor individuals. So panel, because proposition has successfully proven to you how the world is definitely going to be better without cash bail, we prevent discrimination, provide more fairness for individuals, and prevent violations of individuals' basic human rights. We tell you that it is going to be clear that we should regret it because these individuals are always going to get harmed, and we prove to you that our world is going to be much more feasible and much more beneficial to these minorities and the whole entire society as a whole. Because of all these reasons above, never power to propose.
Judge, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, let me pull up a timer here. Okay, my time will start in 3, 2, 1. Judge, panel, do you think that it is so reasonable to change the whole justice system due to 5%? Is that really that reasonable to change the whole justice system because of 5%? Which is what we are debating here today. So, firstly, onto my speech. I'll first would like to go over some rebuttals, then clarifications on characterization, extensions on my first speaker's arguments, and then my own arguments. So a few rebuttals to the second speaker speech. Basically, throughout the whole second speaker, they have basically talked about how these minorities, they're getting bullied, right, into going to jail, right, and all these effects on society, right.
But the fact is that most of what they said about how minorities are getting bullied and such, the thing that they've forgotten is to characterize these minorities. As our first speaker has said, inside these minorities, the poor people, right, the minority, right, they're more likely to commit crimes, and that is that is true. No, that is not true, but that's a well-known fact, right? Do you know why? Well, because these minorities, these poor people, right, are most likely brought up in a society in which it's forced for them to do so, in which it's told them to do so, right? That in a sense, their society is messed up, right? That in a sense, they are trying to go after. That in a sense, their society, right, is actually flawed, right? That they're going to be chasing after these things. That in a sense, these poor people actually do commit crimes, and we've already said evidence for. But even if you don't buy that, right? The fact is that they talk about how their plan makes it more efficient. More efficient. Is it really though? As a system that has been in place for 200 years, is that really that much more efficient? And secondly, even then, about their cash bill, which we believe that their plan is to take rid of cash bill. We'll explain to you. In which we believe that their plan is to get rid of cash bill. We'll told you why that is so detrimental here today. So onto my clarifications on characterization. Firstly, I'd like to go through a few clarifications on characterization. So firstly, characterization. Let's characterize the main stakeholders here, being that the criminals, right? Both the innocent and the guilty, right? As we see inside the society, most of these criminals are actually guilty, right? That they aren't put into jail for no reason, right? Or else they'll be in mainstream media. But the fact is that most of them, as we said inside our evidence, 95% of them are actually guilty, right? But only 5% of them left are innocent, right? The fact is that they're trying to change that 5%, and they might be saying, "Oh, that's 5% out of a really big number, so it has to be really big, right?" But the fact is that they're forgetting about the main stakeholder here, society, right? Why is this justice system in place? Well, it's because to benefit their society. So what does society want exactly? Well, society basically wants this teaching of them, right? That they want to basically rehabilitate them, right? That in a sense, all the other side has really told you here, it's the worst case scenarios. They've never given a single
Why?
Yes?
So under your side of the house, you're completely fine with a mother who stole some carrots so she could feed her kids, spending a year in jail waiting for trial?
We see they're pulling the extreme, but we are fine with the kid who has been dealing with drugs for over 10 years now and has finally gotten caught, which is what this motion is about. So, the point is that they're focusing on this small minority. Now, can they tell you today, right now in this debate, can they tell you how much of a percentage of people who go to jail are mothers who are stealing carrots for their children? How much of a percentage of people who go to jail are those type of people? They can't even tell you that, right? Then that's the truth. That's the truth of the case, right? They're focusing on this very small minority. So with the characterization done, I would like to go through some extensions, right? Firstly, on the first argument, right, about deterrence. What is deterrence exactly? Deterrence is basically when we have a harsher system, right, that enforces these points, it discourages them from doing such things, right? That in fact, the deterrence can cause people to stop committing these crimes in the future, right? The fact is that, okay, even if you might be saying, oh, but cash bail helps with that, right? The thing is that there's already other systems in place, such as trial, right? The thing is that even if they get the cash bail, right, they're still going to do those same crimes because they've never learned about what's wrong with them, right? They in fact they'll eventually get caught, right? So those rich people that they said that they keep on committing crimes, and the fact is that they never get it. Well, that's the thing though. Most of them actually do. They're lying to you, right? They're giving you this small minority, right? That most of these people they actually do get caught, right? And anyway, I would like to also clarify onto my first argument that why does it help society? Well, it helps society because if you're more able to enforce this, right, it was more able to change society. Because to change society, you need to enforce this sort of harsh system, right? That in a sense, what you're characterizing, yes.
Okay, so your link says that most people arrested are guilty, but aren't you still letting the rich individuals go if they're able to pay the amount of bail?
No, we have a trial. The fact is that when they have this cash bail, right? The fact is that when they have this cash bail, right, they'll still have to go through a trial, right? And even if they get rid of out of their cash bail, they're more likely to do the crimes again and again, right? The fact is that they're going to get caught. A cash bail cannot save them from a second-degree murder. But secondly, I like to extend on my second argument, which is being incapacitation, right? In fact, that it basically incapacitation makes them not able to do the crime, as I explained in Deterrence, right? If they're not caught inside this, right, then they're more likely to going to do that crime later on, right? The fact is that because most of these poor people are doing these crimes, right, that they're more likely to be stopped doing these crimes, right? If you the fact is that because they're not able to pay the cash bail, right, that they're more likely to not do those crimes. That they're more likely to be monitors. How does this help society? Well, it helps because most of this criminal gauge, right, is actually controlled inside society. Now, onto my own arguments. Firstly, my first argument being rehabilitation, right? What is rehabilitation? It's the betterment of the person. So what do we see these jails as? They're not like Chinese sweatshops with a bunch of bars which are locked behind forever with rotting carcasses around you. We see these rehabilitation as places in which, sure, you get punishment, but you also get rehabilitation, right? That in fact, you also get rehabilitation for the mistakes you've done, right? That in fact is a much better place, right? In society, these people have to go out on themselves, right? Most of people won't go out themselves, right? That in fact, this rehabilitation helps them find a better way. And secondly, I'd like to talk about my second argument being retribution. It's basically justice, right? That we bring more justice into society. You might be talking about the minority and the convicted, but you never talked about the victims, right? The victims still had to suffer against those crimes, right? Right? The fact is that the victims, including the minority itself, can also be greatly detrimented, right? The fact is that all they care about is that sentence, right? While forgetting what that sentence means. They think that jail is a place where you rot and die. Well, no, jail is a place where you can come back as much better than ever, right? The fact is that under our side, we provide a much better society. We provide people who are coming out of jail who are more likely to do better things going on, instead of on their side, in which they talk about having these cash bails are so detrimental to these minorities, in which they've forgotten the real stakeholders, society, which is why I'm so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Hi, can you please let me know when I can begin?
Whenever you're ready.
Alright, so prefer gender pronouns she, her. I'll be taking POIs verbally, but please don't badger me. With that said, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. I think it's funny that our opponents tell you that our case is narrow when we actually analyze it from the perspective of minority groups, the rich who actually care about how the system works, and also the values of politicians, among other things. And then they tell you that cash bails have no professional opposition. Judge, please look up cash bail on YouTube right now. You'll find 4 TED Talks at the top of your page talking about how it is discriminatory in nature and problematic in terms of influencing decisions. Just 4 clarifications before I dive in right into the several clash points that I found within today's debate. Firstly, I believe this is this House regrets motion, believing that that we do not have to reform the entire system, as this is a value debate, meaning we simply reflect on the past and talk about whether it's done more harm than good or not. Secondly, I don't think it's about how long the system has been in place. Yes, the system has been in place for 200 years, but slavery has also been in place for the entirety of that period of history before segregation was diminished. Thirdly, I think in the previous speech, the DPM also conceded directly to our case when responding to our POI by saying that richer people, when let out of jail, they're likely to commit these same crimes again. But fourthly, I think that most of their examples are extreme due to the fact that they just characterize it as the fact that most of these rich people will do these things, right? With that said, then I'm going to further characterize what this looks like under this house within my clash points. First of all, then on principle. I think what we told you is several things. We told you ever since the get-go that this is principally wrong to condition people's money and freedom based on their ability to pay the amount of cash bail, right? And I think we've told you ever since the get-go that sure, we're okay with if you're guilty, then sure, we're able to take away the rights. But at the point when you're still, before your hearing on a legal front, you're still technically innocent due to the principle in the CJS with since you're innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, we tell you that in this case and scenario, you're still innocent and therefore no one has a right to take that away from you, right? And we believe that that's a direct inequity their case directly supports within their side of the house, and they have had no response to this, meaning that we directly win on a principle front, where I'll take you later. But secondly, then, let's talk about who has a better system for the poor. I think what we've told you ever since the first speech is several things, right? We told you that people are jailed for being poor, and we think that at the point where you cannot put together bail is where you're forced to stay detained in holding cells, right? And we gave information analysis, I'll take you later, an illustration on how this is likely to manifest within disenfranchised groups on things like drug-related crimes or minor petty offenses, right? We also told you many levels of analysis on how this affects a person on not only a psychic level, because when they enter the prison, they're already incredibly vulnerable because they're scared, because they were just stealing some food to feed their kids. But secondly, I think that on a financial level, they cannot work and provide while you're there waiting for the trial. And also, under these cases, we have to say that they cannot do basic things such as putting food on the table for their family, right? And I think that also, in this case scenario, this is actually worse for furthering the anti-poor narrative that is already existent within the status quo about how these poor are already antagonized within the status quo, about how people already view them as pests for eating up their space, right? And their response to this is solely that the majority of people are guilty, right? I think the first thing to note here is that their entire case is built off of this one statistic from the Pew Research Center, which obviously cannot be admitted because it's world schools. But secondly, I think that this data could be taken from a smaller scope and selected within prejudice, as it could be taken from an area of high crime, etc. But thirdly, I don't really think they ever give you any real mechanisms as to how this manifests in every single case and scenario. But let's be generous and say that even in the majority of disenfranchised groups are guilty, we tell you things like petty theft and crimes of necessity stem from things like poverty, which we believe is a government failure of their inability of instilling functional support systems, such as welfare systems, to actually support these poor people who are systemically oppressed within the status quo, right? And I also think that just by saying the debate is not about poor people, they ignore the most vulnerable and key stakeholder, because notice that the people who are not able to pay the price of these bails are the ones who are most affected within the comparative, right? I think the reason why they have to engage with this, their claims are largely untrue about taking the worst cases, because they're the most affected within our case, and that focuses on that, right? I think furthermore, incarcerated people also have a median annual income of 20,000 prior to their incarceration, which we believe is almost 50% less than non-incarcerated people of similar ages, right? So in this case and scenario, it proves the majority of people within our side of the house are poor even before they're incarcerated, which means that this is obviously not the extreme and minority of the cases that they try to push you to think about, right? Furthermore, I just like to say that I find it highly ignorant of them to just say that we didn't characterize these minorities when Sophia actually characterized to you what this would look like on multiple occasions in terms of different types of crime as well, right? Before I move on, yes, I'll take that POI. So you rather take 100% of the people's freedom in order to just ensure that those 5 people aren't suffering from any inequality? I think that it's fundamentally unfair on your side of the house to punish the poor for being poor, right? Essentially what you're doing on your side is that, since you can't pay this amount of cash bail, we're just going to put you in this place where you're going to be secured with a bunch of other hardened criminals who will probably be able to coerce you into doing things such as join these gangs and do favors for them because you have no other choice. And then later when you go back to your family, you're not going to be able to provide for them either, right? I think that in that case, the scenario that is directly classist and on your side of the house, that is uniquely existent within your side of the house, right? I don't really understand how this applies to our side either, but moving on then. So next of all, I'm going to talk about how we're going to be able to achieve a more efficient criminal justice system within our side of the house, right? I think ever since the get-go, ever since Sophia provided you with our counterfactual, we told you how this is going to be much more efficient within court, right? We told you how cases are going to get to court quicker, and this is likely to be true for a lot of reasons, right? The first of which is that there's no reasons for politicians to change the system and the status quo because the cash bail system still works for them, right? They're not able to hold people in jail while waiting for trial because in their privileged eyes, it's not harming anybody because they're not the direct victims of this, and they don't really care about the poor because they don't make up the majority of their voter base anyways, right? But secondly, I think on their side of the house, they lose the excuse to justify holding people in jail forever, right? I think that in this case and scenario, like since we've already proven to you the legal standard of like being innocent until proven guilty, no thank you. I think that in that case and scenario within their side of the house, I think that people are less likely to be able to justify their actions when it directly contradicts what the justice system stands for in and of itself within the status quo, right? And I think that on our side of the house, we better solve issues within the current system, right? Because like rich people cannot just buy their way out of a holding cell with their money and like use it to get like a good lawyer so they don't end up getting convicted, right? And I think that the counterfactual we also told you is much more efficient within court, right? And instead of being held in jail for months or even weeks, they go to court very quickly within things such as like hours. And we think that this would be the world when we regret cash bail because politicians and justice system would do this out of necessity because it's not directly benefiting them, so they actively have an incentive to change, right? Now what did they tell you? They told you within their case, and the bulk of their case is when they say that there's no bail money, so people still have no incentive to show up, right? I don't really think that this makes any sense at all because like they're physically in jail. They can't just like run away and not show up when they're like within the jail cell itself. I just like really don't understand how that's supposed to be the case unless they prove that like they're gonna run away or something. And then they talk about how there's going to be better rehabilitation within their side of the house, how that's like a key role in the criminal justice system. I think that on just like a net, there's like a multitude of like studies that show the majority of people who are in jail and are like awaiting court are like a mixture of different types of criminals, right? That means that people who are in jail for things such as like petty theft, for things such as like trying to get a living for their family and actually just like put food on the table because of systemic oppression that didn't allow them to do so in the first place. I think that in their side of the house, these people are going to be put in the same place with people who are awaiting trial for things such as like with things such as like organized crime, with things that are like much harder, with like hardened criminals and criminals who are probably going to coerce them into doing things that they won't recover from even after they get out of jail because they could just like hunt you down, right? And I think we've already like applied to you multitudes of reasons as to why this is true about systemically why these people are likely to be encountering them at the same place, but also on a psychic level why these people are likely to buy into these like narratives and be able to like concede to these people and their oppression, right? So for all the reasons above, we believe that on our side of the house is the only side of the house that is able to not be classist and able to pursue a much better and much more efficient criminal justice system. For all the reasons above, please vote government. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, good. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Quote, if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. Well, clearly, the proposition is not a comrade of the opposition side. So first of all, I'm going to go through like a few rebuttals about why the case totally failed in the first speaker's speech and why our side is ensuring a better society for everyone, not only for the minorities, but also for the greater society, even the rich. So I'm going to then talk about the one main clash, because this debate was really narrow, caused by the proposition side, because they only focused on one thing, so there's only one clash. So first of all, I'm going to talk about some rebuttals. They totally misunderstood the concept of cash bail, and they because with their misconception of that, and with their so-called counterfactual, which we only heard like one sentence of, which was we made a counterfactual, they don't understand the whole point. So first of all, cash bail is here so the judges can prove the innocence of the criminal. Cash bail is here so the judges can be sure and have a guarantee that these criminals, whether they want to show up or not, actually come to the trial to get tested and to have like a fair decision whether this person should sit 10 years in jail or he's innocent and can go back to his family or whoever needs to meet him again. So first of all, cash bail, yeah. So they talked about that the rich can still go away with cash bail, and that they have with this, they're not responsible for their actions and they can commit as many crimes as they want. But sorry, we already said in the second speech that even if the rich, they still manage to pay the cash bill, they still have to show up for trial because it's a guarantee that you're going to show up. And if you pay this guarantee, then the judges have to expect you to show up, and you have to expect yourself to show up for the trial too. So yeah, even if they can pay, they still have to go to the trial. So at this point, the judge can have the ability to identify whether this person is actually guilty or not. Like the Theranos case, Elizabeth, she did have to pay all the cash bills, and then at the end she still have to show up. Even though the court took longer to prove that Elizabeth was actually committed a lot of fraud for her product, she still went to jail, even though she could pay all the cash bills. So see how this implements that. This justice system is not heavily weighted. It's equal at some point. Okay, and they talked about how the rich they can't pay the cash bill, so they are extremely vulnerable and that they will have psychological damage. Well, I'm gonna move on to psychological damage later. And so basically about the point. So we provided an advantage for them to actually rebut, but they totally ignored this advantage. And this advantage being, we have bondsmen. Bondsmen are just companies that just loan you money so you can actually pay the cash bill. And when you actually pay the cash bill, you go to trial, and if you're innocent or if you're found guilty, when you being innocent, you get out and then you pay back the money to the bondsman. Second, if you're guilty, you sit in jail, and then when you come out, you can pay back the money. So at this point, we see the poor, even though they're being poor, they still have a chance to loan money and pay, and it's not going to be from shark loaners or underground mafia, Russia boss society, where everyone is just killing each other off because they can't pay the money, or just threatening to kill their whole family because they can't pay the money. We see there are more peaceful ways to a solution. And yeah. So basically, they talk that we have ignored the whole poor people because they're and them being the most vulnerable people in society, that it's bad for their side to do that. Okay, yes, we did ignore the poor people. I did this at the second speech because we already solved the problem, and you guys didn't bring up anything about rebutting to any of the arguments, even though we stated 4 perfect arguments for you to rebut. And yeah, so basically, yeah, their side is just ensuring inequality. They would rather take the minority 5% in exchange for 95% of society, which is not guilty. What?
Okay, so we told you explicitly how bondsmen are able to capitalize on the fact that these families are incredibly desperate and can do things like charge super high interest rates, which leads to coercive deals. Tell us why this is beneficial.
Why are bondsmen exactly these people who give you money and then they would kill your family for something else? So first of all, we talked about that the bondsmen are not actually bad. They are acceptable in society because these people they get the loans and they give it to the poor people, and the poor people still have to pay. Okay, it's not actually about the money. It's you still have to pay. If you lend the money, you still have to pay because you did something wrong, and you're using this money to cover up of what you did wrong. So if you have cover up what you did wrong, the most reasonable thing to do under this case is to pay back. Or are you just gonna sit in your loans forever and then you're not gonna give the money back because you think the loan is just given to you because you deserve it? So yeah, so basically they talked about the counterfactual. We didn't really hear anything of it. So what is the counterfactual? Just ban cash bill? Do they have an alternative to tell us what is going to happen if they ban cash bill, and what is going to be looking under their society? Simply providing us with, it's going to be more efficient, and the vulnerable people are saved. It's not enough because we can't paint a clear picture of how this society is going to look like. So yeah, okay, moving on to my clashes. So judges, we already know that the most reasonable and most explicit clash in this debate despite its narrowness, is inequality of under their side versus the greater good for society under our side. So basically, what are the whole thing, summarizing their whole case in one sentence, is that they're willing to make everyone suffer for a minority that already has their problems solved for a greater society which is innocent. What about the middle class? The middle class didn't do anything. And what about the other classes? Not all rich people are bad. Like for the other poor people that are actually good, they're suffering all this greatness in society, this equality for society for something one. So these criminals, these petty criminals, they can't be like tolerated, and they don't have to suffer that much intolerance in society, and that they can be released of their crimes even though they didn't do anything to repay it. And we've clearly told them that this going to jail may be worse at the first place, but they didn't talk about the rehabilitation at our side. Our second speaker talked about that this rehabilitation will make them feel remorse and feel guilty and then think about what they did wrong. So when they get released from jail, they can go back and be a better father, mother, and not just someone who steals carrots from a grocery shop, and actually be someone that can know how to pay back society with what they have. This rehabilitation and this system and with this keeping of cash bill makes these criminals aware that they actually have to get remorse. They have to change themselves and not expect for society change for them. So yeah, basically clashing on for our side. Our side, we paint you a picture, judges. This is why you should vote for our side. We paint you a picture that even with this cash bill, even with this inequality that their side states, we have find alternatives. We have find ways to solve these problems. And this cash bill is to ensure people go to trial. So it's important. It's important for the judges and for the court trials to go efficient and fast enough. While the rich, example under their case, which they're so obsessed about, will not be able to go into detention. They still have to go to the trial, and this justice is still served because the judges, they can still make out if these rich people are guilty or not. So under this point, we already know we have to win the debate because their side, we have from the side is not 3 speeches about totally different issues. It's 3 speeches about the same issue over and over again, even though our side has provided an alternative. Instead, their side just chooses to ignore. So, Judge, what I'm telling you is justice is on our side because we preserve the system. We preserve the system, which is the marker, which is the key component to identifying injustice in the system. We don't make like 95% of all the innocent people suffer just because 5% of them stole carrots, just because 5 of them they went into school shootings because the boy or girl got made fun of their poverty or clothes. We ensure you a society in which everyone is benefited and not everyone is left out because these poor people still have a chance, and at the end of the debate, we're so proud to oppose. Thank you.
So, Judge, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Seeing as this is the last round of this debate tournament, I feel like it's very fitting to start off my speech with, in the words of my coach, Dr. Daniel R. Fruit. Boy, are they confused. So firstly, I like to set up 3 criteria. Firstly, who better benefits society, who better benefits justice, and who better solves crime, right? And I will show you why. So let's first compare worlds. On their world, what did they say, right? Firstly, they regret this scale bash, right? So they bring out this plan in which they take out cash bill, right? Now, I would like to stress something out, right? My Swift speaker said a lot of good rebuttals, right? But the most important one, in which we keep on reiterating every single time, is the fact that they didn't solve any of the things under their plan. Because the thing is that predators still exist under their plan, right? Okay, if you take out cash bail, right? Then what happens is that firstly, what do you think these rich people are, right? Under their characterization, these rich people are most likely to bribe the judges. In a sense, there's no other way for these poor people to get out, right? Then in a sense, they're causing even more prejudice, right? Because prejudice is solved. Because the judges are more likely to be bribed from the rich people once you take out this cash bail, right? But secondly, it also causes the taking away of legitimacy, right? Firstly, I don't think they understand what cash bail actually means. There are some regulations behind cash bail, right? You aren't going to get a cash bail if you committed a second-degree murder. You might get a cash bail if you say you stole something, right? The fact is that this cash bail, not only one helps certain scenarios, right? Certain scenarios in which people can easily get out for a petty crime, right? They don't have to go through this jail, right? The fact is that there are requirements, right? And taking away this cash bail actually causes even more corruption, right? Because they're more likely to bribe the judges, right? Because they don't have the system. What do they give on their side, right? Firstly, there are two main arguments. It's that the vulnerability of these minorities. Oh my God, 5% of the people. We should change the whole government system. We should overthrow the government. Oh my God, what are you gonna do? That 5% of the people, as we told you over and over and over again, shouldn't be changing the whole society, right? But even then, if you don't take my point for it, the point is that they don't benefit this vulnerability. They're more vulnerable because it's less legitimacy on their side, right? And secondly, their main point is about efficiency. They're more efficient? No, it isn't. You're going to have less legitimacy. You're not going to solve your prejudice, and more likely justices are going to be bribed, right? Under your characterization. And let me stress, your characterization. So what about our one? Well, we give out four main arguments. Firstly, deterrence, incapacitation, rehabilitation, and retribution. This all benefits society. How? Well, basically, firstly, when you are convicted to jail, right, you're more likely to not commit those crimes, right? Secondly, you're more likely to not commit those crimes even after you get out of jail because you've gone through jail back and over again, right? And thirdly, there's rehabilitation in jail, right? The fact is that you're more likely to go in jail and become a better person because rehabilitation in society depends on you, and retribution is the justice, right? You're serving justice to not only the victims but to society. So who better benefits society? We see it's on our side. Not only do we benefit the minority as giving them a way out of their bad lives, right? As they're raised inside these poor societies, as they're raised inside these flawed societies. But secondly, who better benefits justice is our side. We aren't causing these illegitimate plans, right? The fact is that we benefit justice because we're upholding them to the victims, to the people, to the society, right? As we develop better people. And lastly, who better solves crime is ours. Because we're not causing more crime, we're actually solving them through jail. So what if I told you here, not only have I told you here we benefit society, we benefit justice, but we also solve crime better. Which is why, as fitting, in the words of my coach, Dr. Daniel R. Fruit, boy, are they confused. Which is why I'm so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Hello, can I confirm that I'm audible and visible? Okay, cool.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In the wise words of our coach Amrit, that is the whitest and most privileged thing I've ever heard. Op case is so incredibly elitist and idealistic. It is currently 2:30 a.m. in my time zone right now, and I am incredibly worn out, but there's no way I'm going to let this slide. They treat the justice system as an entity that is always correct and always sniffs out the criminals. Mind you, it took the justice system 3 months to figure out how to conduct court proceedings on Zoom because these justices did not know how to use the application. They treat prisons as if everyone is going to get their own Malcolm X experience, where they have their own cells and can borrow books from the prison library and have peace and quiet all day so you can self-reflect. That was 60 years ago. Now people literally have to sleep with one eye open because they are afraid people will shiv them and stab them in their sleep. They literally concede that they ignore the poor. They admit that they ignore the poor, and their justification for ignoring the poor is that this problem doesn't exist and it's already been solved. Mind you, 1 in every 3 black men is going to be in prison and is going to be incarcerated at some point in their life. I don't think that you can say that that we shouldn't care about minorities because they're not the majority, and because we shouldn't give up society and we shouldn't give up the way society functions for 5% of people. 3 reasons why proposition wins today's debate then. Firstly, I think we're logically consistent. What did we tell you from the start? Firstly, we told you why the system ultimately destroys human beings, right? We gave you 2 extensive layers of analysis as to why these impacts tend to harm the most the most vulnerable of society the most. We secondly already proved to you why the minority is the most vulnerable actor, right? This doesn't just because we use the phrasing and we use the phrasing minority doesn't mean that these people don't take up a large portion of society and don't and this is mostly because they are racial minorities or ethnic minorities or social economic minorities. I think that some privileged white kid who's had too much to drink and rams into a building probably is going to get out of detainment early and just get a really good lawyer with daddy's money because he can, right? I think that it's only on our side of the house where we actually care about the people who are actually suffering because they don't have the money to bail themselves out of jail. I think we don't need to care about the people who are rich and can probably escape any sort of accountability. Thirdly, we told you that our counterfactual is so much better because on our side, there's a clear incentive to get these cases to court quicker when you cannot just shoo away these people and say that they're waiting in jail for their hearing date. I think it's only on our side of the house where if those people who are waiting for trial are also those with significant amount of influence, because the rich cannot just pay themselves out if it's not a choice. I think that it's only on our side of the house and where we have this sort of where we have a sense of efficiency. I think that opposition is incredibly assertive from the start, right? They view the motives behind crime as completely malicious and one-sided. They cite some research center that 90% of these people are guilty and hence they deserve to be punished. I think they ignore our framing when we tell you that that a lot of these crimes tend to be crimes of necessity, right? Their weird framing coming out of LO, where they tell you that you get your bail money back by the end of your trial, is incredibly assertive to me. They don't give us any mechanisms as to why this is true. They also assert that prison is somehow an ideal environment for self-reflection. They don't prove any mechanisms behind this. Second reason why we win then, I think we engage with our best case and worst case scenarios and are very charitable to our oppositions, right? I think we gave you structural reasons as to why minorities are the most harmed. I don't think opposition can win today's debate by pushing them to the side. I think opposition is unengaging for a few reasons. Firstly, they dismiss a large portion of our case by saying that government is too extreme, and they don't engage in a paradigm in which this could be true, right? They don't give you even if analysis. They don't engage with their worst case scenario. This is not sufficient to take down our case. But they also talk about jail like it is like a hospital waiting room, in a sense that it is somewhere you'd rather not be right now, but the conditions there are not as bad as we characterize, right? I think they need to do some more. I think it's already way too late in today's debate for them to justify their responses, because it's only on our side of the house where we're able to guarantee that these people and these minorities get better treatment. For those reasons, we're so proud to propose.
Great debate, everyone.
Good job, everyone.
Thanks for
As
debating.
my coach would have said, good round. I'm pretty sure we're gonna just let it be for this round. We're not gonna disclose, but great round, y'all. Wow, better than a lot of the high school rounds I've seen lately for Worlds. Congrats.
Seconded, I forgot.
Thank you for judging us.
Thanks for judging. Thank you, opponents,
Thank
for
you
this
for
wonderful
judging. Thank you, opponents.
Thank you for judging. Thank you, opponents.
Bye.
Y'all have a good day and best of luck hearing the results in a little bit. Goodbye,
Wait,
y'all.
also, may I just ask when the results are going to be announced?
I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5.